appraisers, I feel like we're always teaching.
Yeah. So when I get handed comps or something like that from an agent, I like to go through them and tell them right then and there, well, this was a good one.
And AI, artificial intelligence, will never be able to offer that. I've had students that have told me that they learn as much from my stories about my experience as they have from the curriculum.
Welcome back to Face Value, a podcast from the Appraisal Institute. I am Warren Boizot, your co-host. And every appraiser is a teacher, whether they intend to be or not. We educate clients about market dynamics. We explain complex valuation issues to attorneys and lenders. Sharing our knowledge is at the core of what we do.
And I'm your other co-host, Tonia Vailas. And many of us appraisers remember our start in the profession with an instructor who made the complexity of evaluation analysis finally click. That moment helped us in our careers, and we forever remember it. That's why today we're focusing on the art and science about teaching appraisers. To help us explore this, we welcome Robert Moorman, and he is one of the Appraisal Institute's most respected and engaging instructors.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I got into appraisal kind of like most people. It wasn't something I didn't know anything about it. I played music professionally for 10 years and then got born again and just didn't want to live on the road anymore and moved back to my hometown. And a buddy of mine had inherited controlling interest in a bank. And so I figured he could give me a job. And they had just started a mortgage lending division. And he said, well, I'll put you in there. And long story short, learned the basics of real estate appraisal while working in the banking profession. And I was in banking up until 1989. That was when the savings and loan crisis was running rampant across the Southwest. And I just thought, well, this is a great time to go get a master's degree. So I did. I went to Texas A&M to get a master's in finance and was blessed to get an assistantship. And my assistantship was to teach Finance 201. And Finance 201 was what they call cowboy finance, where you touched on every aspect of finance. And so there was a little bit about real estate. And I guess the performer in me came out when I was teaching, and I got good reviews. And as I was getting ready to graduate, the department head said, you know, you've got this real estate appraisal background, and we need someone to teach Finance 471, which was a Principles of Real Estate course. And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. So it was a great deal because I was on the universities. I was like an employee of the university, and I was doing real estate appraisal as a sole practitioner, I was in Brenham, Texas, which is a small town. So I did everything that came in the door, did residential, commercial, just whatever anybody needed appraised, I appraised, and I was teaching at A&M at the same time. Because I did one appraisal with the guy who was heading up the department, and then the second appraisal, I got everything together and said, let's go do the appraisal, Garden. And he looked at me and said, let's do what? No, you're the appraiser. I thought, okay. And one of the members of the board of directors owned the Chevrolet dealership, and he wanted it appraised. I'm the appraiser, right? I can still remember stretching that tape across the body shop, stopping and going, I have no idea what I'm doing, none whatsoever. And luckily, there was a correspondence course with the American Institute of Banking on real estate appraisal, and they used the appraisal of real estate as their textbook. So I enrolled in that and found out that I was right. I had no idea of what I was doing. And took that course and saw, man, I need to find out more about this. And that's when I got involved with the Institute. And there was a job with Wells Fargo in Colorado. And I thought, I might like to live in Colorado. So I applied for it. So I went to work for Wells as a reviewer. And that's kind of when everything really opened up. I got designated while I was working at Wells and became an instructor for the Institute while I was working there. And it really opened up a whole world of things for me, got involved with the chapter.
Tonia, I have not had the pleasure of being in one of Rob's classes. Have you?
So I have not. No, I have. I've taken a one-day seminar from Rob, but recently one of my staff members took a course with Rob. I wanted to make sure they had the best educator, so I made sure they took his class. And when I'd walk by, I'd see the person sitting there studying the whole time, because now they're doing virtual courses. And the person's head was down actually paying attention. I'm like, is it really that difficult? I couldn't remember a class being that difficult where I was just writing the whole time, but it's been a while since I took an appraisal course. Rob, but what first inspired you to go into teaching?
Well, I taught for the AIB before I went to A&M, and I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed the back and forth with the students, and I find it's a constant learning process, and I like that. Plus, I'm getting older, and I want to keep the neural pathways open, and I think teaching is good for that. Staying fresh, if you will.
Rob, what concept in a class do you think that people have the hardest time grasping?
Effective age seems to give people trouble in the principles course quite a bit. I mean, I probably spend more time on that simply because it's not something that you get right away. It's one of those, like so many things in our profession, you learn about it and then you have to experience it before it really becomes a thing for you. And so, I try to give examples to show some pictures of what we mean by effective age when I'm looking at a house or we're looking at an office building, showing contrast between interiors and all of that, just to give them an idea of, okay, what is meant by effective age? And then, of course, the difference between the hypothetical condition and the extraordinary assumption. Just get the definition in your head, and it isn't that hard. But I think effective age, the discounted cash flow gives people some challenges. I always say, look, this is real estate, not rocket science. Don't make it more than it is, because it's all very logical. I mean, what we do is a very logical, step-by-step profession.
But I feel like I teach every day. So that's one of the things, like appraisers, I feel like we're always teaching. Like we always have trainees or junior appraisers who come to us with questions. And even if not within our own offices, we have people coming in from the outside, just going to a meeting. How would you do this? What do you think about this? And it just feels like we're always learning and constantly teaching. So I do want to do one of the training courses for becoming an instructor, because I do know we have an aging population of instructors and a lot of people are retiring. So we do need to get new instructors. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles that we have in the upcoming years.
There are a number of folks who've gone through the instructor training that have never audited a course. And I think that's a shame. It takes some doing to go through that process. But I think the audit is a necessary thing, because when you're taking a course to pass it, you've got a different focus than when you're observing how a course is taught. It's a big difference. When I'm sitting here trying to learn something and pass this test, I'm concentrating on a different aspect than, okay, how is this material best presented? Which is what you're doing when you audit. I agree with you, Tonia. We need to get some new instructors going.
No, Warren and I, we're not instructors for the organization or for any appraising, not just Appraisal Institute, but any appraising courses, any appraisal courses. What's the first thing you would recommend for us to do?
I think go back over the principles and procedures courses, because that's the groundwork for it all. I know Mike McDonough, the current president, he wants an instructor training. So I'm hopeful that it will happen, without a doubt. And I would recommend that, because once you're approved, then you can start auditing. And I don't know of any instructors who don't, because the instructor has to give permission for the audit. And I don't know anybody that's an instructor that would not let you audit, or co-teach.
And what about co-teach?
Now that may be a different story, Tonia. I don't know. I'm open to co-teaching all the time, just simply because I don't want to deny anybody an opportunity to get into it.
Rob, I'm curious too. So you've been around long enough to experience all three. You obviously experienced all in person, then you did some time only via Zoom, then now we're in the hybrid world. What's your preference? Did you find maybe some positives and negatives of the different types?
Well, I prefer classroom. I just enjoy the personal interaction. I just do. The synchronous I like it, fine. The advantage, of course, is you don't have to travel anywhere and you don't have to get a hotel and do all of that. But I don't know about in y'all states. We're a non-disclosure state here in Texas. And if you don't have a network, you're dead in the water. You are. And it's very difficult to have that network when everything is virtual. But I still bounce things off of folks that I took classes with back in the 80s. You miss that when it's all virtual. And I don't think our profession will ever be one that doesn't require that network. I just don't. And you make the network in class, in a classroom situation. I do prefer it. I teach lots of synchronous classes because I enjoy that as well. Like I said, the good points are because I always tell them, look, I'm not just here for the 3 hours or 3.5 hours that I'm on camera. You have a question, you let me know. I mean, I tell my students in the classroom that if you don't pass the test, let me know, or I'll follow up, and we'll see what it takes to get you to pass the test, because I don't feel like it's just a class. I teach you and we're done. I couldn't count the number of peers I have that I call and they call me, and we just bounce stuff off of each other. You don't get that outside of the classroom or the meetings and the events that we have.
And how about hybrid? Have you done hybrid where you have some in person and some virtual?
I have, and it's difficult because it's hard to pay attention to the folks that aren't there. You're trying to go from the people that are there to the chat to the people that are there to the chat. I can do it. It just is a little bit difficult. The world is changing, just like Warren said. We've gone from all classroom to all virtual to now we're doing both. Yeah, you got to move with the times.
I think even, doing this, I know you, Rob, I know you, Warren, so it's easier to talk and we're just having conversation here. But when you're trying to learn something, sometimes I just want to raise my hand and ask a question. And by the time you see the hand being raised on synchronous, or, you catch that window because you might have 40 students in a screen, it just becomes difficult. And I feel like the personal touch is no longer there.
I agree. I try very much to make it there. I mean, I tell my stories and try to engage with folks to share their stories as well. I mean, there's great war stories out there for sure from everybody, and it's just hard. Like you said, it is harder to engage virtually than it is in person.
Your personal life and work, how do you get all this teaching in?
You make time for what you want to do. I've found that in life that you do make time for the things you want to do. And my job is remote. I'm quality control for Cushman and Wakefield, so I can read reports anywhere. That's one of the great things, about the internet and all that.
What kind of platforms do you use for the online teaching?
Well, you have Zoom, and then the Institute uses GoToMeeting. I'm not that well versed in how to break them out into small groups and all of that sort of thing. I leave that up to administrator for the session. You're sharing your screen, so I can throw anything up there on my screen that I want. Like when I teach review theory, I'm going back and forth from the curriculum to standard 3 and standard 4, or back to work examples that I have that I've redacted to show them how to do different aspects of the review.
Do you know what I found, Warren, is when he said that someone immersed themselves in standards 3 and 4. As appraisers, we know he's talking about USPAP, but just imagine anyone else just picking up this podcast and catching that and just saying, hey, they jumped right into standard 3 and 4. And you're like, what does that mean? So, Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit about standards 3 and 4, or 1 and 2 if you want to go there?
Sure. We're talking about the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And most states, I think the majority of the states, that's mandatory to comply with that document that's affectionately known as USPAP. And in USPAP, there are several standards that apply to different appraisal appraisal disciplines. Standards 1 and 2 have to do with the production aspect of real estate appraisal, and standards 3 and 4 have to do with review of real estate appraisal. Standard 3 is the development of your review, and standard 4 is over the reporting of your review. And there are advisory opinions. Advisory opinion 20 is not part of USPAP. It is extra. I dare say that anyone would have a hard time saying it's not authoritative, since it does address USPAP.
I feel like we do every day as residential appraisers have the opportunity to teach. The key, and I do feel it's a skill, I think I'm pretty good at it, talking in layman's terms, because you can't go to a homeowner, you can't even go to a realtor, honestly, and talk about standards 3 and 4 and that kind of thing. So you have to be able to talk at a layman's level. And I do honestly every opportunity try to not only learn something, say, from an agent, but teach them as well. So when I get handed, comps or something like that from an agent sitting there right at the kitchen table, I like to go through them and tell them right then and there, well, this was a good one. However, the reason I didn't use this is this. And then I always get later, oh, thanks for letting me know. I didn't know that was the case. Or I didn't know, the big one I always talk about with agents is, oh, I didn't use this one because it was outside of a mile. They have that old idea that if it's not within a mile, can't use it, can't go on a report. And I say, well, that's kind of a little loose standard you can go by, but just know that in the future, don't always search based on that, because that's not a hard and fast rule. We as appraisers know that something can be outside of a market and still be a good comp, that kind of a thing. So little stuff like that, I always like to take the opportunity to teach.
Yeah, it's amazing you said that, because you're reminding me of some arbitration cases where you learn from the opposing side. So the appraisers have to discuss what they did in their appraisal, and each appraiser does things differently. You may use all the same comps, you may have different adjustments, you may use different comps for various reasons. So I think this teaching aspect just follows us forever.
If we can get our message out, there shouldn't be any barriers to this other than experience and education. And you've got to get the education. And I really think as long as, like I say, I've been doing this since 1983, and I have been hearing every year since 1983 that appraisers have no future. So, okay, when's it over? That's 43 years of we're ending, so I don't see it ending in the next 20, 30 years either. And to me, it's a great profession. The only thing I'd rather be doing than appraisal is having hit records and doing concerts. That's the only thing I'd rather be doing. And so I think the future is good. I have a lot of optimism that the new leadership at the AI is going to achieve what they're trying to do, bringing more people into the profession. And as a result, there's going to be a need for more teachers, and there will be a need for more new continuing education.
And how do you feel artificial intelligence is going to play a role in that?
I don't think it's going to replace instructors, because artificial intelligence has never measured a building. Artificial intelligence has never talked to a landlord, or never talked to a tenant or a homeowner. And that's what we offer. We see the property, we're there in the market, our boots are on the ground. And AI, artificial intelligence, will never be able to offer that. I've had students that have told me that they learned as much from my stories about my experience as they have from the curriculum. Artificial intelligence will never have those stories.
Rob, thank you for coming today. This was awesome. Appreciate you coming on, and great to see you again. Tonia, if anybody had an idea out there, interesting ideas such as today's topic, where would they get a hold of us?
And they should definitely send us an email at facevalue@appraisalinstitute.org so that we can respond. As you know, Rob did come to us and said he wanted to talk about teaching. So that's why he's here today. And thank you all for joining us today on Face Value.